Welcome back, friends. Another week of tournaments are done and in the books, and we have all the data here to cover for you. We'll take a look at the tournament results from the previous weeks. We'll go over the LVO results and see who the big winner was. We'll take a look at the faction focus, a deeper dive on the Space Marines and Sisters of Battle, and we'll take a look at the overall current state of the meta. So sit back, relax, and let's get right to it. Before we get started, we'll just take a quick reminder to do the YouTube pleasantries. If you guys found this video helpful or informative, please give it a like. It really helps spread the video out there for more people to see. And if you really liked it, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps support me and support the channel. Thanks, guys. Alright, so for the previous week, we have the numbers in here. So we had 1,500 players last week, and for the data slate, we had 3,200 total. So we have 4 weeks of data, and half of the total number of players came in 1 week, thanks to LVO. We had over 1,000 players alone. Games played, we had over 8,000 games played. For the data slate, we're sitting at just under 17,000. So we're getting really high up into those numbers where things are starting to balance out, and you can start pulling some clean data out of that. And for the tournaments, we had 13 tournaments last week and 51 total for the data slate. First thing we're going to take a look at is LVO, the Las Vegas Open. And the big winner was Deathwatch, I'm sure as everyone has heard already, and with their Black Spear Task Force. The finals was a Deathwatch for Space Marines, and the Space Marines was running the Vanguard Spearhead Task Force. It was a little bit of a surprise, I think, for everybody to see Deathwatch go from, well, not being an army at all to winning LVO and even going against Space Marines in the finals. I don't think if you're looking back a month ago, you would have called either one of those armies being there. So it was a pleasant surprise. It was nice to see, and it's a big congratulations to the player who brought the Deathwatch army out and managed to pull out the win. Alright, and the first thing we're going to look at from the previous week is the win percentage. So this week everything's going to look pretty normal because we had a ton of data to sift through thanks to LVO, and looking at it, the win percentage is pretty even across the board. The lowest is 40%, but the highest is 53%, so we don't really have anything really too far out of the ordinary. Sisters is at the bottom with 40%, so they're the one kind of outlier that's struggling, and that's been sort of a reoccurring trend for the last few weeks. They're really sitting in a rough spot right now. But you had stuff at the top like Necrons, you had Demons, World Eaters, Guard, all sitting at just over 50%. And you're going to see a lot of these numbers kind of balance out, I think, due to LVO, because as the tournament progresses through rounds 2, 3, 4, the players who lose games, they start getting paired with players who also lost games. So you're going to get a lot of people in that midsection of like 3-3, 4-2, 3-2 kind of records. So everything's going to stay quite balanced, where there's only a very few select players. There's 1,000 plus that played there that actually move up to the top tables, where you're going to see the 10-0, 9-1, 8-2 records that would normally skew a win percentage. But because there's so many people in that middle group, it kind of brought everything back down to the averages, which it's nice to see that, given a huge sample size, that you got everything pretty close to where you want it to be. And you got Army Representation next. So here at the top, we have Space Marines at almost 9%. They just keep climbing. People loving them. The big changes from last data slate really pumped those numbers up, and people are bringing them like crazy. They're already a really popular faction to begin with, but given the fact that they actually have some ability to win games, people are really bringing them to the table. And then we also have Necrons and Custodes. It's nice to see Custodes up that high. They're a popular army, but they're usually not this high. But that data slate, the buffs they got to the bikes and everything else, really has kind of boosted their popularity over the coming weeks. And you see people are seeing more success with them, and you're seeing more people bring them to the table. Down at the bottom, agents, you kind of just throw away. It's only 1% of the people. There's only like 4 players, even with all of LVO. I think only 5 or 6 people maybe for all of last week. Sisters of Battle, again, they just keep dropping and dropping. People are really disillusioned with that army right now. I think the changes were a little overbearing and kind of is dissuading people from playing them. And, Deathwatch down there, 1.4% of the players. Not a lot of people, but hey, just enough to win LVO, which is pretty impressive all in its own right. And the next thing we're going to take a look at is the percentage of players who went X0 and X1. This is people who only lost 1 game or lost no games at a tournament. Now, these numbers are kind of different for the week than they normally are. Normally, you're seeing an average of about 13 to 15%, and this week the average is only 10%. And that's because of the same kind of reason as the win rates. As the LVO progressed, those people who lost a game or 2 games, they kind of get relegated down to the lower tables, and those people just keep fighting it out, and you get a lot of 3-2, 2-3 finishes, 5-2 kind of things, 4-1, 1-4. So everything kind of balances out. Normally, if you would have if you had a smaller tournament, those people who went 4-0, 5-1, those, or 5-0, and those type of things, they would have a bigger skew on the data. But because those people were only a small fraction of this one tournament, and this one tournament made up 2/3 of all the games on the weekend, that those numbers really shrank down. So you're seeing a pretty even split across the board. Agents, again, they only have a few players, so any success they see, it just kind of skews the numbers. You have to throw them out. But you have Guard at 16%, Eldari, Chaos Demons, Necrons sitting at all 13%, which normally would be just below average, but is actually above average this week. And down at the bottom, you have Space Wolves, Chaos Knights, Drukhari. They're all around 3-2%. So those people brought a lot of those to LVO, I'm guessing, and they were relegated to the bottom tables pretty quickly by the looks of it. All right, and we're going to move on and take a look at all the stats put together. So this is Army Rates, X0, X1 percentage, and Army Representation all put together. This just gives us a little overall look at all the armies combined, and you can see the farther their sort of bar stretches across, sort of generally the higher the numbers are, and overall everything is pretty even. I mean, you have to ignore agents again because they're 50% skewed data down at the bottom, but generally speaking everything is looking pretty even. You have Necrons, Custodians, and Space Marines all sitting at the highest army rep, and they're the ones who are kind of leading, and they're only leading because of that army representation. No one is outright leading due to win rate. No one is outright leading due to XO X1 percentage. You didn't have a tournament with 2 people doing really good with one army and skewing the data. So, overall, with a large sample size, everyone's pretty close. So it's, it's nice to see that there's a fairly decent balance. There's armies struggling, that are down at the bottom, like Knights, Drukhari, Space Wolves. They need a little help, but overall, their win percentage is still average. So with a little help, we can raise those lower ones up and get everyone even, which is so far good to see. And here's the tournament wins for the last week for each army. Space Marines continue to perform well with another 3 tournament wins last week. Deathwatch, again, just going to keep highlighting it because it's kind of crazy to see, but 1 tournament win, and that was the biggest one of the week at LVO, one of the biggest ones of the year, mind you. And then we also had Demons, Necrons, and World Eaters all pulling in 2 wins each. One thing to note is Demons, and I think both those tournament wins were with Legion of Excess. So far, all the tournament wins this edition, or this data slate, have been with Legion of Excess. So there's definitely something there. It's definitely the highest or most overpowered detachment for all of Demons, with all the 4 they got for Grotmas. So it's something to keep an eye on. There might be seeing some adjustments soon. And we're going to take a look at our first faction focus. Now this one is going to be on Space Marines. Over the last 8 weeks, and especially the last 3 weeks, their army representation climbing. So right around December 16th, that's when the data slate dropped. And then after that, people are realizing, hey, there's positive changes. There's, this is fun to play. You're 7%, 8.5%, 8.7% of people. So they just keep getting more and more players each week. And their win percentage actually is gone up on average, which is kind of surprising because Space Marines kind of suffer from the issue where they're the intro army to the hobby. They are the army that people see when they walk in the store, they see when they play video games, and that's the army they want to play. And you have a lot of new people playing them, you have a lot of new people taking them to armies, a lot of inexperienced people, and it kind of drags their numbers down. While they have high representation, their win percentage is almost never above 50%, no matter how good they are. And the fact that they're sitting around 50% for the last 3 weeks, even with all the newer and more inexperienced players that they tend to have, is a testament to how good they're really doing. So I'd be curious to see if you were able to drill down to the experienced players or the players who go to a lot of tournaments and playing for a while, playing Space Marines. I'm sure their numbers would actually be pretty high. And if you look down here at the Librarius Conclave, you can see that the new Grotmas Detachment only has a 38% win rate. It's not doing too hot. It's actually doing the worst. So it's definitely kind of maybe looking like a miss on the Grotmas Detachment, but they didn't make their gains through Grotmas. They made it through the buffs that were handed out to them through Oath of Moment and all that in the last data slate. And we're going to move on to the other faction focus, sort of on the other end of the spectrum, is Sisters of Batle. So this is an army that is struggling. If you look at the last 4 weeks, we see their army representation dropping almost every week. They were back in their heyday like a month or two ago. They were sitting at like 4 or 5%, and that's an army that usually doesn't have that much play, but because of how good they were, people were bringing them like crazy. After the Dataslate changes, they just plummeted. They're only at 1.3% for the last 2 weeks. Win percentage is sitting around 40% for the last 3 weeks. So they're in a really rough spot. The only detachment that seems to be seeing any success is Hallowed Martyrs. 60% of people are bringing them, and they only have about a 51% win rate. So the other 40% are kind of sitting in the 30s, low 40s to 30s. So there is maybe a little bit of play with them, but they're very pigeonholed into one specific detachment. So that's not what you want to see. You want to be able to bring a couple different things and have some success. And if you look at the ranks of the 27, so they're pretty much, except for win percentage, and win percentage is kind of skewed a little bit by the first week of tournaments on December 16th. But I think it was right before Christmas. You know, you probably just, you don't really know what you're getting right then. But most everything is in the bottom 2 or 3, so they are definitely in a bad spot. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some changes in the opposite direction next Dataslate to sort of boost them back up and give them a little life. Alright, so we're going to go to the results for the current Dataslate. This is 4 weeks of data put together here. So looking at it, we have the highest win percentage is Agents at 57%. Again, they may have 20 people total, so that number is not quite reliable yet. We need some more data to sort of make that even out into a consistent number. But Deathwatch and Necrons are sitting at the highest at 54 and 53%, and it's actually pretty impressive because Games Workshop sort of gives their acceptable win rate at 45 to 55%. So anything within that they deem as, you know, okay, and maybe minor tweaks here and there. And usually you have some armies sitting at 57, upwards of 60%. You know, like last Dataslate, we had the Gene Stealer cults up there, and then there was before that 1,000 Suns and Sisters of Batle and Orks for a small time. But right now, everything is kind of in the middle. We have a few armies at the bottom, Admech and Black Templars, and then we also have some Death Guards, 1,000 Suns, Chaos Knights, all sitting below that 45%. But even then, it's really not too low. It does kind of seem that the armies with bad Grotmas detachments are really the ones suffering. You know, people weren't too thrilled about Admech, Black Templars. The Death Guard one is kind of meh. Chaos Knights is, you know, it's neat, but there's really nothing there. 1,000 Suns is kind of like counterintuitive to the way they actually play. So the armies that really didn't get that Grotmas detachment with a lot of oomph in them, they're really struggling right now. And this next chart we're going to show here is the tournament wins by week. So each color on the chart is a different week. So this kind of gives you a breakdown of how each army is getting their wins like each week. So you can take a look at things like Chaos Demons in week. They didn't win anything, and then Legion of Excess kind of found its niche, and now they got 3 wins, and then they got 2 wins. Space Marines, same thing, didn't win anything, and then they got 2 and 3. Orks won all their stuff in week 3. And then you have like stuff that's kind of a little bit more even spread, like Tau. They won 1 each week, except for last week. But overall, it's kind of starting to skew a little bit more towards the top-heavy side. We have most of the tournament wins within 8 armies, and everything else has only got 2 or 1. So while the win rates might be even, the winners and the people taking those wins home are kind of skewing towards specific armies. It might be something to look at, that there might be a specific list or specific units or something that is making those armies win more while they still are, the general population is not finding a ton of success with it. You would think that the higher the tournament wins, the sort of higher the overall win percentage would be. But again, it's still only 51 tournaments. It's not a huge sample size, which should start to see a little bit better over the next couple weeks. So far, it is looking like only a few armies are seeing the success to like have enough power to bring it home. All right, and this is the meta health rating for the current Dataslate. So the meta health rating is a rating I've sort of created that just compares the averages of an army's win percentage, X0, X1, army rep, and tournament wins against the average of all armies. So in an ideal world, everything would be 100. So if you have a rating of 100, that you are perfectly average compared to everybody else. So the green solid bar is 100, so that's where everyone should be, and the blue bars is each army. And now anything over, I would say, 120 is doing consistently above average, and anything under 80 is doing consistently below average in most categories. Sometimes you can have a little flip-flop here and there depending on what's going on, but at the top we have Necrons at 134, and if you look at their ratings, they're above average in win percentage, army representation, tournament wins, and XOX1 percentage, so their number is quite high. And then you have the opposite side of the spectrum, you have Knights and Votan. They're kind of below average on pretty much everything, so their number is down quite low. Now we do have a few armies sitting over 120 and a few armies below 80, so on average, we have 3 or 4 armies that are overachieving in all categories and 3 or 4 armies underachieving. But generally speaking, everyone is pretty much within a nice, safe range. So far this Dataslate, things aren't wildly disproportionate. Everyone is doing fairly equal, except for a few tiny outliers, and I think some small adjustments could bring everyone back into a nice, even range of right around 100. Alright guys, that is it for the week. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video if you found it helpful or informative. And if you really liked it, please don't forget to subscribe. It really helps support me, support the channel, helps me bring this new content every week and make better videos for you guys. I'm going to try to get into doing, I know I said this last week, but I'm going to try to get into doing some AOS videos. I have to start grabbing the data and maybe putting out a tournament results for AOS every week. But if you have any questions or concerns or comments, please leave them down below. And thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next week.